This story happened many years ago, in the summer, at my friend Jake's birthday party. I was 24 years old at the time. Jake lives in his house, and the party was held in the backyard of his house. With us was his mother, Aunt Susan, a brunette in her mid-40s with nice facial features, though she couldn't be described as traditionally stunning. Aunt Susan had been divorced for a long time, and I had never heard any rumors of her having lovers. We drank and partied. Aunt Susan was right there with us, dancing and drinking, and even agreed to join us for a slow dance. During one of these dances, already a little relaxed from the alcohol, I allowed myself to whisper a few compliments in her ear and lower my hand a little lower than is proper etiquette. No one seemed to notice, and Aunt Susan didn't mind. She even pressed her body harder against mine. Although the thought crossed my mind that I wouldn't mind spending the whole day with her, and more, I didn't take it too seriously. Around midnight, Aunt Susan said goodnight to us and retired to the house to go to bed. The party went on, and at one point I decided to go into the house to wash up. That's when everything changed. As I came out of the bathroom, I ran into Aunt Susan. To keep her from falling, I reached out to put my arm around her waist, but my arm slipped and I ended up grabbing her back, pulling her to me. She was now in a short, light nightgown that barely reached her hips, and my hand was on her leg. It was immediately obvious that she was not wearing enough clothes. We stared at each other for a few moments. The awkwardness in our gazes, fueled by the alcohol, quickly turned into something much more intensely interesting. "Tom, aren't you going to let go of my ass anytime soon?" Aunt Susan asked with a smile. "Honestly, I wouldn't want to do that," I reply. Even though Aunt Susan's body had lost a little of its youthful firmness, she was still amazing. "Or maybe you'd like this one even more," she said with a teasing smile, pushing me back into the bathroom, closing the door behind her and locking it shut. All I could do was surrender to the experience this beautiful, mature woman was offering me. "You realize that no one will ever know about this," she said softly, "but if you want to, it doesn't have to be the last time." After that, Aunt Susan took a shower and went to bed. I went back to the party, telling my friends I was taking a little nap. They seemed to buy it. And it wasn't the last time Aunt Susan and I shared something like that. A few weeks later, Jake invited me to visit again. Not to a party this time, but just to sit by the pool for an afternoon. Jake's stepmother, Jessica, had come into the family a few years ago after his father had remarried. She was a striking woman with blonde hair and a perfect figure that still caught everyone's attention. As we relaxed by the pool, Jake eventually left to get drinks at the store, leaving me alone with Jessica. She was lying on one of the lounge chairs by the pool in a bikini, her tanned skin glistening in the sun. I tried not to look away, but it was hard not to notice how stunning she looked. "Tom, can you help me with something?" she asked, her voice breaking through my thoughts. "My back hurts from all this gardening. Could you give me a quick massage?" I hesitated for a moment, but then, remembering my previous encounter with Aunt Susan, I couldn't help myself. "Sure, I'd love to," I said, and moved over to where she was lying. Jessica had rolled over onto her stomach, her bikini panties barely covering her chiseled curves. I sat down next to her, starting at her shoulders, and ran my hands down her back. Her skin was smooth and soft under my fingers, and I could feel her muscles relax as I applied pressure to them. "You have magic hands," she murmured, her voice low and almost inviting. I couldn't help but notice how her breathing quickened as my hands moved lower, gently massaging the small of her back. It was a test of willpower to maintain the innocence of the massage, but as her body responded, the line between appropriate and inappropriate became increasingly blurred. "Can you massage my feet too?" she asked, rolling over onto her back, her bikini barely staying in place. My pulse quickened, but I kept my composure as I began massaging her legs. The muscles in her thighs tensed under my touch, but soon they smoothed out and her body relaxed completely in my hands. At one point, Jessica caught my gaze, and her eyes lingered on mine with what seemed to me to be great meaning. I couldn't help but think of what Aunt Susan had told me, that such secrets should never be revealed. But at that moment, the temptation was too strong. "I think that's enough for today," she said suddenly, sitting up and adjusting her bikini. A teasing glint appeared in her eyes. "You really know how to make a woman feel good." At that moment, Jake returned, oblivious to the tension that was building between me and his stepmother. He handed me a drink, and we all laid down by the pool as if nothing had happened. But that moment was memorable, and I wondered how far things could have gone if Jake hadn't returned at that moment. Later that night, after Jake had gone to bed, I lingered by the pool, unable to escape the feel of Jessica's body under my hands. As I stood there, looking into the water, I heard a voice behind me. "You know," Jessica said quietly, stepping out to the edge of the pool, "if you ever want to finish what you started, all you have to do is ask." I turned to face her, the moonlight softly illuminating her skin. She smiled, a promise in her eyes, but she didn't insist on continuing. With a wave of her hand, she disappeared into the house, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Some part of me wanted to follow her, to take the next step. But another part of me knew that if I did, there would be no turning back.